Yeah.
So, Mucho Amor Lifestyle Podcast, and it's all about giving back to the industry. I had already amazing guests so far, but today I'm here with Dre Masso, and brother, it's a big honor to me. And it was one of the podcasts, of course, I was looking forward since we started with the whole thing. And yeah, maybe you can tell us in a nutshell about your journey in the bartending industry and how you became kind of interested in sustainability.
Yeah, Simon, thanks very much for having me. And yeah, we've been trying to do this for a while now. And yeah, just getting the timings right and linking up hasn't been the easiest thing. We both travel a fair bit, and I just want to say, yeah, thanks for inviting me. Also, well done for doing this. You know, a lot of people talk about keeping this kind of platform up and running. I know it's not the easiest thing, so praise to you. In terms of my background, if I may, so this year I'm celebrating 3 decades of making cocktails in bars.
Wow.
I'm not normally one for celebrating birthdays, but I'm pretty proud of this milestone. I love this industry. When I was 17, I was at Richmond College in London. I was studying photography amongst Spanish and sociology. But I mentioned photography because it's quite an expensive thing to study. So the paper and the chemicals, the negatives, the
Right.
camera, all the equipment itself. So I worked in a bar. So at the age of 17, I was, washing glasses and changing ashtrays. And then as I turned 18, I started making drinks in that bar. It had a cocktail menu of sorts. There was zero training. I was suddenly making drinks and people were ordering cocktails. And I looked to my right and asked the bartender there, like, how do I make this drink? And they shouted it. And, it was kind of thrown into the deep end. So probably not the best start, but there were lots of aspects that I did enjoy from certainly from that place. And pretty quickly, I found my style to make those drinks. I loved the interaction with the guests. I loved, making something, giving it to someone, and having an immediate reaction, generally speaking, of positivity. So after college, I made the decision. Well, actually, I didn't know what I wanted to do. I couldn't put myself through university, certainly not knowing like what I wanted to do. Like it would be insane to spend that amount of money. And what I was doing at that time, I enjoyed. So, being in London, I thought, okay, how, what should I do? And I started investigating the places that had some kind of cocktail program. So I was asking people, who are the people that I should be working with, or what are the places? So I then started to live and work in central London, and I found a place in Soho, and kind of went from one place to another until I found a venue called the Atlantic Bar and Grill. And at the time, it was probably the most recognized place in the UK, probably in the world, owned by a guy called Oliver Payton. He's the gentleman that brought Absolute to the UK, amongst many other things, but a pioneer, an entrepreneur. He was involved in the art world, and he found this beautiful space. So I found it, probably 2 years after it opened, and I was very impressed with the level of bartending skill, and it had bartenders from all over the world. They took it very seriously, had a great training program. So that was really the start of my career. But throughout my path, I've made it my business to either go and work in places that I think are special and that can teach me something, or work with people. So another place like that was the Lab Bar, London Academy of Bartending, based in the heart of Soho, run by two great bartenders, Douglas Ankara and Richard Hargroves. And it started off as a bar school. It became a bar. I really wanted to be part of that very extensive cocktail list. I made a point of working with Dick Bradshaw when he was doing a kind of part-time scenario at the Lonsdale. That's also when I started to work with Henry Besant. So actually, I went to Lonsdale because I wanted to work with Henry, and then actually Dick Bradshaw was doing the every Tuesday night shift. So I made it my business to do every Tuesday with him.
So maybe for the younger bartenders, we can explain, like, he's the inventor of legendary cocktails such as the espresso martini or the bramble, like big.
Oh, so I mean, you can reel off. There's a bikini martini that I love. There's the Carol Channing. There's the Russian Spring Punch, the Treacle, the Wibble. We really know him for probably espresso martini, bramble, and treacle, but it's worth really zoning in because, you know, when we talk about classic cocktails, there's very few drinks that have been created, I'd say, in the last 30 years that we would now consider classics. Jörg Meyer's Basil Smash is one of them, and I'd say Douglas Ancra's Porn Star Martini is now a classic that you see everywhere. But Dick's created like 3 or 4 that have stood the test of time. As a bartender, I say it certainly is, or should be, a mission for you to create one of these iconic drinks. And I've created drinks for venues that have been successful within their venue, but they haven't had global fame. Really,
but certainly you helped definitely one of the classic cocktails or to gain popularity over the world, which is the Tommys Margarita, definitely. And Julio always mentions that without you it wouldn't be that big in the whole world. And I think maybe it's also we can track it back to your time of Dick, because you are a fan of these kind of cocktails, right?
I think so. I mean, what you've just said ties in pretty nicely, because someone else that I met and I thought I need to spend more time with was Julio Bermejo. We first met in 2001, and in 2003, after like a really beautiful tasting of 100% agave spirits, that, you know, I was suddenly like, oh, like I need to know more. And he, being Julio, was like, come and visit us at Tommy's. I heard that as him saying, come and see me in San Francisco, and that's what I did. And I spent 6 months with him, just absorbing information. He has this very infectious, contagious character. He's a great hospitalitarian. I love seeing him in his comfort zone. There's a lot that I took on board and brought back for myself in terms of my like armory back to the UK. But what I didn't realize, he has this house cocktail, which is certainly 100% agave tequila, freshly squeezed limes, a la menu on the spot, and then agave syrup. That was just his preferred formula. It didn't have a name, but I was there every day, you know, watching every guest with like a tasting glass of tequila and a house cocktail. And it certainly is my favorite way to drink tequila if it's not neat. It's just a beautiful harmony of these simple flavors, 3 ingredients. When I came back to London, you know, you could get agave in a health store. It wasn't readily available, but you could find it. So I was buying tubs of agave, going to my favorite bars like Lonsdale, like Trailer Happiness, like the Lab, and say, oh, here's agave, you've got limes, you've got some decent tequila, will you make me a Tommy's Margarita? And I was just like spreading it, because selfishly that's what I wanted to drink. I wasn't thinking let's make it famous. I just like, this is what I want to drink. Don't drink anything else. And we very quickly started to see Tommy's Margaritas on all the menus, and Julio years later was like, Dre, you gave it that name. Like, we, you know, it seems like a very simple equation, really. And I was like, really? It's, for me, it's always been the Tommy's Margarita. But yeah, that was a key point in my life of just someone else that I wanted to learn from. And really he started that obsession and love for tequila.
Amazing.
But yeah, in a nutshell, I started in London. I spent a good amount of time in Southeast Asia, a little bit of time in Colombia, at the same time you were there, a little time in Spain. I'm now back in London. Actually, I live just outside, but most of my work is within central London. It feels good after having a break to come back and feel kind of revived. But yeah, in a nutshell, that you asked about my bartending experience.
Yeah.
It's if I can sum it up, it's 30 years. I've opened and operated more than 30 different venues, and I'd say the key point has been, in terms of bar venues, a place called Potato Head in Bali. And you also mentioned that word sustainability. Now we're all doing little things, and the general language within industry is, I think, is changing for the better the whole time. But what they did in Bali was remarkable, and that came from, they built a beach club in Seminyak, or on Seminyak Beach, in 2010 when I started working with them. There was no idea or thought process about being sustainable or resourceful, but the boss was learning to be like that. I think we were all starting to have that vocabulary. But what we did see on the sand, on the beach, you got the Indian Ocean, the beach, and then the beach club, is that it was heavily littered, sometimes more so during certain parts of the year. When you've got like storms that come in, it's bringing in all this rubbish. I don't know if it's coming from the island of Java or from the island itself, but it was very evident. And the different venues would help to clean that up. But that started the conversation of, okay, we can see this like one-time use plastic being thrown away and coming back, inland again. How can we minimize that? But what they've done, I mean, they're now considered a sustainable village, and they've been certified and recognized by UNESCO. So it's a validated recognition,
right?
And they now have facilities within their tiny village, if you like. So it started as a beach club, and then first hotel, now their second hotel, and then double the size of the beach club, so another pool, right. And within that complex, we're talking about more than 20 different bar units. So there's a bar on the pool, there's a bar on the roof, there's several different restaurants. Scale, yeah. But they have, and what they want to do is, like, they're very stylistic, and it's a very fun brand, and they want to maintain all of that. But they want to, their goal is to be completely plant-based in the next couple of years. They have an Indonesian plant-based restaurant, which is fantastic. They have I think they call it a low waste or zero waste restaurant, which showcases coastal ingredients. So it's predominantly fish, but everything has been factored. So even with, like, let's say the shells of oysters or mussels, that gets crushed, and that goes into some of the things they make, but also into some of the feed for the chickens that are used in some of the other restaurants. Amazing. So everything's very circular. They have a shop there called Circle, I think, which sells a lot of the things that they've made. They have the machinery there to, if they collect the plastic or find plastic, like the lids for plastic bottles, they chip away. So they turn them into chips, and then they melt that plastic, and they turn a lot of that into some of the amenities that are used within the hotels. Everything from, like, the soap dispensers, the rubbish bin. They have compost facilities. They're making all their own ice now. Great. So and they've had experts come into their businesses and say, okay, even things like, they were making lots of mistakes. Your toilet paper is individually wrapped and wrapped in thick, and just how can they improve the behavior of the business? It's always that question: how can we improve the behavior of the business? But what I love is that they're still a very fun, very stylish brand. One of the most stylish brands, I think, globally. Full stop.
Amazing.
They're doing all this cool stuff. They really support the locally made stuff, the local community. All the bricks in the first hotel were handmade, using coconut fibers. I mean, we could go on forever, but just check out Potato Head Barley and you can see some of the stuff they're doing.
And this is just one of the, how should I say, missions you have been part of. There's another brand where you're massively involved, obviously, which is to switch back to the tequila part, which is a very special spirit, we both know. So with Altos Tequila, I mean, where you are a co-creator, and we both know that the drive to become a very sustainable brand is also linked very much with your ideas and your mindset. So maybe you get us a little bit of that.
Well, I'll rewind a little bit just to kind of
put things exactly. Let's put the
because I mentioned Julio, and so I have this incredible encounter with Julio. I go and learn about tequila. I then come back to London, and Julio says, I want to take some bartenders and journalists to Mexico, and I put forward a list. So it was a big group, and Henry Besson, I've just started to kind of work with, and I just met him really, but we kind of had so I did many distilleries in a week, and when we came back, Henry and I had the opportunity to write a book called Margarita Rocks, 70 recipes, so a celebration of the margarita. Inside a tribute to what we had seen with Tommy's in San Francisco. A really good selection of tequila, but also food from that region, food from Jalisco.
Nice.
And then that's when the conversation started with Pernod Ricard, and that was very much unplanned, and I don't even know if organic's the right word. It's kind of like the right time, the right place. They said, come and meet Jesus Hernandez again. We had been there already, but come and see what he's doing. And he was working on a new liquid. And because we were like these two dudes in London flying the tequila flag, they said, look, we're looking for people to be involved, and do you want to come on the tasting panel? And Jesus was very open-minded. I don't think I had heard of a collaboration at that point. So the conversation started in 2007. I'm sure there were, but I hadn't heard of a collaboration between bartender and distiller. And suddenly we were at the distillery, blending different tequilas with Jesus and tasting them, and he's asking us the questions that we wanted to hear. Guys, what do you want to do with this? And we were like, well, we love cocktails. We want to have a tequila that we can reach for, that isn't too expensive and too niche, and just kind of everyday good quality tequila at the right price that we could throw into a Tommy's Margarita or sip or down or whatever you want to do with it. But we kind of needed that in the UK, and I think globally we needed that a tequila that was great but also greatly priced. And I think you and I both work for the brand, and we love what they do, but I think Altos, possibly more than any other brand in the last 10 years, I think its legend is that it's not only converted a lot of bartenders it's converted a lot of guests, and now a lot of home cocktail
Fully
makers.
agree.
It's a kind of brand that people go, oh, this is not like the tequila that I drank 20 years ago. Oh, it's smooth. Oh, it's
100%.
all these other herbaceous. So we don't really talk about that, but I think Altos has done and when I say Altos, the whole global team has done a really good job at just helping the category to be better represented and better respected.
Definitely.
So
Educational programs, definitely. Like think about Alberto Navarro when he was aligning and promoting. It's a big understanding, and I'm glad you mentioned it. When I started working with Altos, I let my mom try, and she's like, tequila, no. And I think it took her 2 years until she realized it's tequila. She was always, what's the name of the gin you're working with? And it was and it was like a positive thing, because gin she liked to drink. And I was like, yeah, but it's a tequila, mom. And then now she knows exactly it's 100% agave tequila. She get educated, and that's as you say, it's a great job. With a global team of Altos, definitely is a big part of it.
I've written a couple of books, and the last book was about making cocktails at home in your kitchen. That's kind of vibe. And that came because a lot of people asked me, Dre, can I have a recipe? I'm sure you get that. What can I make at home that's easy?
Yeah.
Altos, lime and agave, in brackets, the Tommys Margarita. So let's just say the Tommys, but there's so many times, and we're circle back to that drink time and time again. But my friends or my wife's friends or my wife's colleagues, I want to make something, or I want to give something to someone, and we often do this. Often we will make a Tommy's and give that in a nice bottle or back into the Altos bottle, but it has this cascading effect because it's also quite a forgiving drink, quite a forgiving cocktail. You use a bit too much lime or a bit too much agave or whatever, or a bit too much tequila, whatever. It always tastes pretty good.
Agree.
So yeah, I passed it to my friends, and then they pass it to their friends, and I think it's a wonderful thing. We don't put a lot of time and money and energy into like big marketing campaigns, and a lot of that is due because I think we have that product at the right price. If we charge a lot more, then a lot more could go into this more spectacular campaigns for really pushing the brand. But I think it's a humble price, and what it is just this gradual growth all the time of people sharing a great experience. So Henry and I were there at the beginning. We were allowed to come into the picture. Jesus was on it anyway. It was happening. He's the real hero in all of this. But we are appreciative that he was like, guys, come in. Tell us what you think. And then the team at House of Tequila was like, cool, we're going to launch it. How do you want to do it? We came up with this idea of Tahona Society then. And when we launched the brand in 2009, we paired it with a training program and a community network called the Tahona Society. And the idea was to bring bartenders from around the world that are into agave and into tequila, and let's start this thing. And
which grew to one of the biggest educational platforms worldwide in terms of sharing love, information about agave. So amazing.
We had this tiny little seed, this little pipe dream, and back to people like, I think someone who's championed this better than most is Carlos Ramirez, who's taken it. Again, we didn't think about the bigger picture. A large idea for the Tahona Society was because there was a lot of misinformation on the category, and we wanted to rectify that. So it was like, okay, let's start, and certainly when we were going to markets that were perhaps not considered one of the main cocktail cities. So we were going to from Moscow to Istanbul to, you've traveled to a lot of the Eastern European countries. Now they're
Belarus, yeah,
catching up really
exactly.
well. But the information that they had their hands on in that time, so we're talking 14 years ago, it wasn't as correct as it is now. So we thought, okay, this is a good opportunity to say, look, here's some cultural, historic information about the country and about the plant and about the liquid, and here are some techniques that we can talk about, and let's start saying the right thing. And all of that was distilled from trips that Henry and I had with Julio in Mexico. It's like, cool, we've been to these distilleries, we've heard from the horse's mouth, let's relay this the right way.
And you already laid it out. Like, this is an open invitation, I think, for everyone who is listening to that. Make sure that you visit, especially all the bartenders. Visit Mexico, visit the distilleries, get involved, get in touch with the differences, why the spirit is so special. Like, you have, like in whiskey, you have different areas, you have a different soil, you have a different flavor profile, water, how the different distillation processes, the oven, the roasting. There's so much. We could talk for hours. I'm sure we could talk for hours, and we always do, and it never gets tiring. So it's an amazing spirit. So, and I mean, super glad that you promoted it, and you were one of the icons, I would say, who really spread this agave love around the world. Definitely. So we're super happy. I'm super happy that I can call you a brother. And
likewise. And I think tequila certainly has this energy that surrounds it, the category and the people involved. Again, we were we went there because we loved it, and then as soon as you step in Mexico, however you look at it, it's such a giving country, and it's one of the countries where I haven't lived, but if I had the chance, I would certainly go for it, because there are, I mean, hundreds of aspects. And I often say this, that it kind of changed my life, and that's why I wanted to do a Mexican bar business in London. And Simon, I think about it all the time, because Green and Red closed in 2010,
right?
And always, like, I'm helping other people, but even now, 2010, 13 years later, right now, I would love to open another tequila venue, because it has all the components that I love. The liquid, the food, the music, the style, the decor, and all of this is captured in Mexico. And I know we've been many times, and it never gets boring. For me, distillery visits in Mexico never get boring, but it's surrounded by some of the best food you're going to eat, and some of the best music you're going to hear. We're often found in the markets.
The hospitality is just sublime. You cannot even beat it. I would say everyone who wants to learn about hospitality, go to Mexico, and you will have the best samples on how it should be. Really,
just very sincere, warm, and they have this kind of very generous and loving nature. And I think that's really that binds everything in Mexico. There are all these wonderful things to see, for sure, but you're surrounded by good people, and they care, and that really enhances the whole experience. So, time and time again, and I'm guessing I've been to Mexico, I don't know, more a dozen times, thereabouts, but I'm excited every time I go.
Same here.
And sometimes I'm doing exactly the same thing, and eating, simple, honest street tacos. But it's such a vibrant experience. I think we're lucky. But my point was, or that I was going to say, is that this affects lots of people. And we had this bar, Green and Red, and it seemed all of the key bartenders went off and did something in the tequila industry. They either like became ambassadors for different brands. Some of them went to work for distilleries. Stefan Ogin was the manager of Green and Red, and he first off became Cazadores ambassador. He was an Altos ambassador, but he now works directly for El Tequileño, the brand, and a quite good position there. And they're in the town of Tequila, and lots of friends that went back to Scandinavia, opened tequila bars, and it has this thing. It has this beautiful energy to it, and it's, I think, the best category out there.
Definitely for me. So we are almost at the end, but maybe what is I want to get to know your future view on the whole industry, not only the agave, maybe the whole industry. Do you think digitalization is coming? I mean, it's obviously it's there. We are doing this podcast here digitally. You're in London, I'm in Germany, in Mannheim. What are your thoughts on it?
It's interesting. I think we're going through quite a turbulent time, and possibly one of the most disruptive times of the 3 decades that I've experienced. And if I can pinpoint that, I think we're challenged with similar things. Here in the UK, we encountered Brexit, which I think is a mess. I don't think it's had anything positive to date. And then obviously with the pandemic, we were thrown back, and those two things caused a lot of people in our industry, but also globally, to say, I'm not going to work in the same way anymore. I'm not going to do those hours and work that hard for that kind of pay. A lot of people had time to have a look at their situation and go, I'm just going to do something that is perhaps easier or different, or they started doing different things. So it's very hard to find a good skilled workforce at the moment. That's a global problem.
Agree. And maybe the digitalization will help us to replace in a way the bartenders. And we always say it's a bad thing. I think maybe it is a good step, because if no one wants to work anymore in bars under these conditions, maybe it can help us in a way. I don't know which way, but I think I try to see the positive side of it.
Yeah, I mean, there could be certain aspects that can assist and improve our industry. I don't know if I can fathom,
I agree. Last week I was in Stockholm, for example, for instance, and there was like a automated barista, like a coffee place, and they argued, listen, I have now more time to talk to you about all the coffee varieties, about everything, and this replaces me, yes, but also it doesn't replace my customer service. So I was like, yes and no, I don't know. It's for me, it's exciting.
Yeah, I think simple examples of that is that it wouldn't surprise me if you'll see things like there are legalities connected to this, but we saw people like Ryan Chettiawardana, who started to do things like really the cocktail in a bottle and no perishables and no ice, and that was like hand that to the guest and let's. They were looking at the scenario. I love them because they're incredibly disruptive, and it starts a conversation.
Yeah.
A lot of people say, but it takes the heart and soul, and is this a proper crafted cocktail? It's like in a bottle. But we're seeing more of that style of drink now, and they did that a few years ago in bars. If you look at things like the milk punch or clarified drinks, they're all kind of pre-mixed, but you've got this beautiful clear drink that's made in seconds and it's consistent. And kind of perfectly made every time. But you might start to see those drinks in vending machines where it takes someone makes them in a big facility and they're loaded up, and perhaps a venue starts doing that. A big venue where you're it's not necessarily a personal or a style bar, perhaps, but it could be something that is incorporated into an airport or something
Right.
else along those lines. But yeah, we're struggling, and it kind of pains me because it's so hard to anyway, it's so hard to open a new place, and then if you can't find good staff who are passionate, it makes it really hard. And obviously, if you're attached to a brand and you want it to work, you want someone that has good experience that can not only sell your house cocktails but have the ability to offer the guest a load more off the menu classics, whatever it may be, but also just have that standard approach that you and I would expect of how they're greeted and how they're looked after and checked on and everything else. And we've kind of lost that. So I think my point is we're back to ground zero. We're going to see a lot more in terms of training, I think, over the next few years globally. And I'm starting to see things already. Training apps, online apps. That's where the digital aspect really comes in a strong way. And I think certainly in England we're going to have a new wave of a younger generation bartender with some new attitude and new thoughts and new philosophies. I think we'll be learning a lot from them as well. But yeah, that it's been really hard. On top of everything else, and this is a global struggle, the cost of everything is more expensive. And this can bounce back to what you and I were talking about earlier. So there is that title sustainability, but really that's also about being resourceful and about that word, the definition is about enduring, about keeping going as long as possible. Now, if you're spending a lot of money in the wrong places when you could be more sensible and more resourceful and using your mind in a strong way, then I think you're creating a better business model. So you're hitting the ground running instead of drowning and having to pay for everything. Someone that we both follow is Doug McMaster from Silo Restaurant, and one of his great quotes is I think it's something along the lines is waste is a lack of the imagination. Because we all have it, but there's so many ways that we could be doing things that we could be doing to improve that.
This would be like a topic, and I'm sure I will have you in more of these sessions because our time is almost running out, but it was very mindful. Thank you so much about introducing everyone into the tequila world. Sustainability is a big thing, and you showing the world that even 1%